Now that we have a storage account created in Windows Azure, then to make use of it, we have to create one or all of the three objects that can actually store data. And again, our choices are tables, queues, and blobs. So for this demonstration, let's have a look at how we actually create some of the tables. Now, I have two tools that you can use to create your tables. And one of them is an additional download, Azure Storage Explorer, which you can get just from within your main Azure page. When you just go into your storage account, there's a link right on there to download the Azure Storage Explorer. So that's one of our options. And then the other one you can see running in the background here is Visual Studio. So the first thing I have to do is add in my storage account, and I've already done that. So there's my storage account right there with the appropriate specifications, and behind that, and I can edit that if I hit my edit button here. There are the values, and they come again directly from the Azure portal. So with those in place, I can always pull up that account, and I'll remember that. I can remove it if I want to at any point in time. But to get started with actually building a table, then we have to go over here to the right hand side and see we have to select our storage type of tables. So obviously we don't have anything yet, and I'm just going to pause on this one right now and flip over to Visual Studio and just show where we can get to the same point. So from Azure here in Visual Studio, first of all, we have to sign in. So we'll put in our credentials. And now that we've signed in there, we can expand these, and here is where we'll see our storage. And there's the same storage account. So if I expand this, we have tables here as well. So in both cases now, I've gotten to the point where I can access and or create tables. So I can just right click here and choose to create a table. And if I return back to my Storage Explorer, then I've got the same option in here where I simply again have to click tables over here on the right hand side, and then underneath table I can click on new. So it really doesn't matter which one I use here. So I'm just going to call this test table 1 and then choose create table. So there's the object created, and if I go back now into Visual Studio, I probably just have to refresh this, and I should now see, there we go, test table 1. So again, either tool doesn't matter. Now, when you actually go to define the properties of the table, again, it doesn't matter which tool you use, but from Storage Explorer, note that there's no right-click functionality here. I can't choose Edit at this point. There's really nothing to edit. You simply create the object, then within there you start defining your entities. So from Storage Explorer, that option is right here under the Entity portion. From Visual Studio, what I have to do is double click on this, and there's my entity editor in the background. So you see again, here are the three required fields of partition key, row key, and timestamp. So without doing anything, those are already there. So I'm just going to return back to my Storage Explorer for this one. So if I want to go ahead and start defining the entities in here, this is where I click New under Entity. Again, we see the same thing, our partition key, our row key, and our timestamp, and those three are actually already set. And even though they do have the data type drop down here, and we discussed some of the data types previously, these ones are actually set by default. They are set to strings, and in fact, they can't be changed. So we're just going to leave those as they are, but of course, we're going to give them some meaningful names. So for partition key, again, this is how we're simply dividing up all of the storage. We want to make sure that certain records are kept separate from others. So let's do an example of product for the partition key, and for the row key, again, the value really doesn't matter at this point. I'm just going to say 001. The timestamp goes in by default. So from that point, now we're ready to start adding in additional properties if we want to. So those ones, again, are always set and they're always required, but we may want to be a little more descriptive. So for something along the lines of the product, maybe we want exactly that, a description. Now this one, since we're creating it ourselves, we absolutely can choose the data type. So whichever one you feel best suits your needs. But for description, a string is probably fine. Let's call this gadgets. And maybe if you want, an ID field, then then that would be certainly fine as well. You can just create anything else that you feel is appropriate, and that one maybe is a good candidate for an integer. So we'll just put in 1, 2, 3, and we can create that entity. So now you see I've got the record here, and again, if I flip back into my Visual Studio, just close out of here and refresh back from here, I should see those same options when I open this up now. So there we go. So again, it doesn't really matter which tool you use. You can create the table from either, and you can in fact edit it from either as well. So whichever one you're more familiar with, more comfortable with, go ahead and start creating your tables using whichever appropriate tool.